Shalom, shalom, shalom. All praise to Yahweh by Shemiyah Shah. All praise to the Most High through the Spirit and the power of Yahweh, who the world knows as God, in the name of His Son, Yahweh Shah, who the world understands as Jesus the Christ, through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shemiyah Shah. Fisherman of Zion back with another video. Don't count this as a light thing to do. Peace and blessings to you. Happy Feast of Dedication, as known as Hanukkah. And Lord willing, you had a mighty new moon through the Spirit of power of Yahweh Shemiyah Shah, the 10th month. So nevertheless, you know, this is a lesson through the spirit of what we are in the spirit of as far as dedication, as far as Hanukkah. Feast of Dedication, this is a spiritual warfare. Life and death is our only options. So through the spirit, this is a lesson touching on a little bit of the history pertaining to Feast of Dedication and things that we have to be mindful of as far as dealing with a spiritual war. Because, you know, the flesh, you know, always goes through pain, sufferings, and trials, as well as the spiritual things is always going to be intact on behalf of the Most High, on how He establishes His wonders and His works in the heavens. But nevertheless, I want to open up with this precept. Peace and blessings to each and every one that will tune in, Lord willing, and those that are tuning in now through the Spirit. So I want to open up with this real quick. The classic Psalms 122. Again, happy Feast of Dedication, and Lord willing, you had a mighty new moon, which it is the 10th month. To those that kept the new moon through the Spirit, as far as the calendar that we follow. So this is Psalms 122, and I'm gonna start at the top, and it reads, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord Yahweh. So it's still a time on the earth where we should be glad. We should be glad that we are able to have the Spirit of the Lord inside our members, inside our minds, and our vessels, to be able to open up our mouths and glorify the Lord, proclaim His righteousness, speak according to His law, statutes, commandments, speak according to standing up for righteousness, speak according to the history that we got to continue to follow, our heritage, the so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, the things that we got to continue to look towards. Peace and blessing to you. You know, it's very important that we continue to be glad for all the Lord has given us, regardless if we have money, regardless if we have a car, regardless if we have to get on a bus and wait for the bus to come in our nearest city, or regardless if we got fired from our jobs, regardless if our relationships with our children, mothers and fathers and households, our significant others are going good or not. We got to continue to be glad if we're still breathing and alive, you know, and if we're not living in the land of living, you know, it's not the end all be all. Even if we're in the grave, even if we have to put a loved one in the grave, it's still another option. And we're going to touch on these things as far as life and death and things like that. But reading this one more time, Psalms 122 and verse 1. I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. You are in the house of the Lord if you strive for righteousness. You are in the house of the Lord if you're striving to keep His commandments, striving to keep the Sabbath, striving to not kill or murder, striving to not steal. You are in the house of the Lord if you're striving to love your wife, if you have a wife, to love your brother, if you have brothers around you, to love your sister, if you have sisters around you. You are in the house of the Lord, because even when you read, let me also get this as well. Even when you read this, it says Psalms 91. This is Psalm chapter 91 from the top. Psalms 91 and verse 1. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. So even in the Lord's presence, He will cover you. So as we always open up with Psalms 122 and verse 1, I was glad when they said it to me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Because if you aren't in the house of the Lord, you know, then you're in the house of the dead. Then you're in the house of troubles. You're in the house of wanting to be in the midst and gathered by darkness. You know, let me also read that in Proverbs, because if you're in the house of the Lord, you're around lights. You know, You're able to see your way through when you don't have the answers always, because it's not always going to be I have the answers right now, right then. I have problems just drop right then and there on me, and I have the answers. So this is what the Lord said about darkness and about death. This is Proverbs 21 and verse 16, and it reads, "The man that wandereth," also the woman, because we know a woman came from a man. Proverbs 21 and 16, "The man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall remain in the congregation of the dead." So this is why it's important for us to be glad, because we all can wander out of the way of understanding, and it's not everybody in the way of understanding. This is a blessing for me to continue to do these videos and to continue to speak on commandments of the Lord, the words of life, even open up the Bible. Because everybody that open up the Bible, everybody that speaks according to the Bible, they're not always righteous. And they don't always strive for righteousness. You even got hypocrites. You got false prophets. You got people that proclaim themselves to be holy and to be righteous. They're saying one thing and walking in course of another thing. So it's important for us to understand that it's a beautiful thing to be glad, and you can't take that away. So this is, let's open up with this real quick. This is Deuteronomy according to the lesson. Lord willing, this will be edifying to you. Don't count this as a light thing to do. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 31. We're going to open up with Deuteronomy 31. And I'm going to start at verse 18. Deuteronomy 31, and I'm going to start at verse 18, and it reads, "And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought, in that they are turned unto other gods." So, of course, our forefathers and our foremothers and in the days of old, we've done, and when I say we, I'm talking about so-called Black, Hispanics, and Native Americans, the seed line of Jacob, the Israelites. We've done wicked many times, over and over, and we still striving as a nation to overcome and to get back where we need to be. Because like the Lord says in the classic, if you turn from your wicked ways, I will heal your land, in First Chronicles. So the Lord said, the evils that we've done. Let me read that one more time. Deuteronomy 31 and 18. "And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought, in that they are turned unto other gods." So even, when you understand the history of Feast of Dedication, it's a reason why we have enemies around us. It's a reason why we have to fight. It's a reason why, because we fell short as a nation. It wasn't always we was fighting forever. In the beginning of time, there wasn't any fighting against the heathens, against the Greeks, against the Seleucid and Ptolemy dynasty. It wasn't no fighting in the beginning. The Lord wants us to understand what we have and what we have to do. So verse 19, Deuteronomy 31:19, before we touch on the history. "Now therefore write ye this song for you, and teach the children of Israel." Deuteronomy 31, and so like I want to go back. Deuteronomy 30. I wanted Deuteronomy 30. Deuteronomy 30 and 19, and it reads, "I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live." So the Lord had set up options for us to be able to look unto, as a father would do. He would look unto his child as a father would do. And even though a lot of us haven't had fathers in our households, according to the curses and things we have to deal with, a lot of us haven't had that structure that was intended for us to have as little boys, as teenagers, as grown men, little princesses and grown men. We haven't had this structure how the Lord intended for us to have, but we're going to get it back though, Lord willing. So life and death was set up before us, and even when you read the history and the stories, going back until the Hasmonean dynasty, the Maccabees, you understand that somebody had to fight. You know, somebody had to be on the forefront and put their lives on the line. This is what the Lord has set up. This is why we have kings. This is why we have judges. This is why we have leaders. You know, even in these last days, you got many standing up, telling a lot of people to stop doing evil, to get our households in order. You know, teach our children, teach our sisters, teach our wives. You know, and for the wives and the sisters to teach the little ones and the other women. So, Feast of Dedication. Now, this is Maccabees. If you never heard of Maccabees before, you find this in the Apocrypha, which, you know, we always like to encourage many to get you an Apocrypha. You know, mine is not in the best shape, you know, but if you see it, it has at the top, first edges all the way down to second Maccabees. So this is the history. And some of this history is things that Daniel prophesied about. When you read the book of Daniel, chapter 8, you know, some of this stuff that you read in Maccabees is touching on things that is prophesied in the book of Daniel, as well as some things that Yahushua, the Messiah, spoke about, you know. So we're going to open up with First Maccabees chapter 1 just to get a brief summary. You know, you're not going to be able to read all, you know, because, you know, it is a lengthy amount of chapters, but just to get a summary, because you have the Hellenistic period, you know, what you have called the Hellenistic period. You have the Hellenistic period, and you have the rulers of the Ptolemies dynasty, and you have the rulers of the Seleucid dynasty, and you have the Hasmonean dynasty, which the Israelites, you know, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, which more so, you know, the Northern Kingdom was not included in this, but more so you have the Jews. You know, you have the Jews, which we know the true Jews, not the Jewish, but the true Jews. You know, the tribe of Judah, or who the world knows as Negroes, the blacks. You know, the Benjamites, and things like that. If you can understand. So this is a time period where, according to the Hasmonean dynasty, Israelites had rose up. You know, and when you read and understand and get into the history, heathens was ruling at this time according to this Greek captivity, because we had many captivities, you know. And just to give you a summary on a brief of it, we have the Egyptian captivity, which was around about 1500 BC. You have the Assyrian captivity, which is around 720 BC. You have the Babylonian captivity, which is around 586 BC. And you have the Persian captivity, which is around 538 BC, and you have the Greek captivity, which is around 332 BC, and you have the Roman captivity, which is around 70 AD, and you have, which we are in now, the American captivity, which is around 1619, but we understand that it goes back to at least the 1400s. So 7 captivities that we, you know, and some things is not always historically documented, you know, things that we also search and find according to history, and things that is aligned up with the Bible. But for more so, the Greek captivity is, which, you know, the Hellenistic period, we're speaking on behalf of that now. So this is First Maccabees chapter 1, and I'm gonna start at verse 1, and it reads, "And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Shittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece, and made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through the ends of the earth. He took the spoils of many nations." So this is heathens going against themselves, you know, because for one, they're not only they're wicked, but they're filled with greed, they're filled with murder, they're filled with just wicked and evilness. Now the Lord also said, I want to get this precept in Mark real quick. The Lord also said, let me get this in Mark. It's the book of Mark, chapter 12. knowing our history is very important, you know, because it's so much that goes on in this walk of life that wants us to forget about things that we have taken from us, things that we have stripped from us. Our names been taken away, our laws, our customs, our heritage has been taken away. Even though we're the ones that have to understand and examine ourselves to get back to that, but you know, when I say they, the heathen have played a significant part on making sure we don't remember and we don't return back to that. But it's our job to come back to the Lord and to come back to our heritage, come back to our laws, statutes, commandments. Now, the heathen have been fighting against themselves, and they're still doing to this day. Now, this is Mark chapter 12, and I'm going to start at verse 26, and it reads, and as touching the dead, so like in Mark chapter 12, and let me see where I want to start at. Mark 12, I think I want to go up a little bit. Mark chapter 12. I'm going to just get this in, I'm going to just get it in Luke. I think I skipped over. I'll just get this in Luke. So this is Luke. I might have misnumbered my precept. This is Luke chapter 11, and I'm going to start at verse 18, and it reads, I'm going to start at verse 17. Luke chapter 11 and verse 17. But he, knowing their thoughts, said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation. So that's what the Greeks were doing, and as well as the Romans was doing as well, and many of the heathens, other nations that are outside of Israel, so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. So reading this again, Luke chapter 11, verse 17. But he, knowing their thoughts, said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. If Satan also be divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand? Because ye say that I cast out devils through Beelzebub. So the Messiah, Yahushua, not only was confounding them, and you know, they was trying to somehow get him slipped up in his words, but he knows all things. You know, he's the ultimate teacher. He let them know that a kingdom that is divided against itself will not stand. You know, there's many different time periods where they was all fighting for rulership and wanting to be on top. And so you read about this in First Maccabees. So just for history's sake, just for history purposes, the Hellenistic period, you know, you have Alexander the Great, which around 334 to 323, he was in a position of ruling, you know. And you have just going based on certain dates to help give you a summary. When you read First Maccabees chapter 2, you know, that speaks on the Hasmonean dynasty. So the Maccabees are having to stand up to fight on behalf of Israelites being killed for not having the heathens, what's the word I want to use? I'm trying to use my words wisely. Not having the heathens customs being put on the forefront. The Israelites rose up to fight for our customs, which is our laws and things that was given to Jacob. Let me get that real quick. So this is in the Apocrypha as well, in Ecclesiasticus chapter 17. I want to get 2 precepts, maybe 3. So this is Sirach, what we know to be Ecclesiasticus chapter 17, and I'm gonna start at verse 17. Ecclesiasticus 17 and verse 17, and it reads, not Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha. Sirach chapter 17 verse 17. For in the division of the nations of the whole earth, he set a ruler over every people. But Israel is the Lord's portion. Verse 18, whom being his firstborn, he nourished it with discipline. and giving him the light of his love, do it not forsake him. Therefore, all their works are as the sun before him, and his eyes are continually upon their work, upon their ways. None of their unrighteous deeds are hid from him, but all their sins are before the Lord. And the Lord also said in 2nd Esdras, and it also says it in the same chapter when you read up, but I'm going to read this in 2nd Esdras. 2nd Esdras chapter 2, and I want to start at verse, matter of fact, I'm going to go to chapter 3, and I'm going to start at verse, 2nd Esdras chapter 3, and I want to start at verse 16. I might get one more precept just for edification. 2nd Esdras chapter 3 and verse 16, it reads, and unto him thou gavest Isaac, and unto Isaac also thou gavest Jacob and Esau. So when you read about the Greeks, when you read about the Romans, you know, these rulers, they come from, you know, the seed line of Esau, you know, which is a heathen. Also thou gavest Jacob and Esau. As for Jacob, thou didst choose him to thee, and put by Esau. And so Jacob became a great multitude. And according to the Greek, put by means under. So the Lord gave us the law, statutes, and commandments. Now also I wanted to get one more precept, but just for the sake of time, I just want to continue to stick to the lesson. Now, let me get this in Psalms real quick. The book of Psalms. Because King David prophesied about the Israelites being given the law as well. Now, this is Psalms 105, and I want to start at verse. I want to start at 9. I'm going to start at verse 8. Psalms 105 and verse 8, and it reads, he hath remembered his covenant forever. It's talking about King David saying the Lord has remembered his covenant. Psalms 105 and 8, he hath remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, which covenant he made with Abraham, and his oath unto Isaac, and confirmed the same unto Jacob for a law, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant. So the Lord have given the Israelites something very, very valuable and significant, which also is included, you know, with being given the Holy Spirit, you know. So when you go back to First Maccabees, you got to understand this history and what is very spiritual about this. Now this is I'm gonna go all the way back to Second Maccabees, because this was going on when these heathens were in rulership. Now this is Second Maccabees chapter 6, and I'm gonna start at verse 6, and it reads, Second Maccabees 6 and verse 6. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So under the Greeks, under their rulership, during this Greek captivity, if we weren't able to call ourselves who we truly are, you know, somewhere, some way, some fashion, you know, that is going to be transpired down to the understanding of a slave, the understanding of forced without your own consent. And that's what you know and understand to be being Hellenized, you know. So this is why you even have in Romans, the first chapter. Let me get this in Romans chapter 1. This is why you have this in Romans chapter 1. Let me read this real quick in Romans chapter 1. Now this is Romans chapter 1, and I'm going to start at verse 14, and it reads, I am. Now this is Paul speaking. So, you know, Paul, he was set up by the Messiah to specifically do a job. You know, his life was literally changed for him to be a vessel unto the Lord, to proclaim the words of life, and to bring back the Israelites to their foundational by default lineage, heritage, to have Paul sent to Israelites in Rome, sent to all these Israelites in these different countries. A lot of people read these epistles and think it's actually talking about heathens. They think it's talking about everybody else outside of the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. But if you don't understand what went on in the days of old, in the Greek captivity, also in parts of history that people don't want to understand or despise, you won't understand what Paul is actually talking about and what he's actually talking and speaking on behalf of. So Romans chapter 1 and verse 14, I am debtor both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise and to the unwise. So you had Israelites that was forced during the Greek captivity under Ptolemy, under Seleucid, under Antiochus, under Alexander. You had Israelites, so-called blacks, Negroes, the real Jews, that was forced to follow their ways. So Paul even said in Romans 1 and 14 that he is bound to them. He's dedicated his life to give them the laws, the statutes, the commandments. He even put his life on the line to show them the right ways to go. This doesn't mean that it's speaking on behalf of a Caucasian or a European man. This is known as the Negro man that follows the customs and traditions of the Greeks. You know, bowing down to their gods, forgetting the Sabbath day, you know, sacrificing swine on certain altars and things like that. And you even had Israelites that actually cooned out, that actually joined the heathen, that didn't want anything to do with their God-given heritage, didn't want anything to do anymore with, you know, fighting for their nation. You know, they were so afraid and they had fear in their heart that they wanted to join the heathen, also join the heathen to kill other Israelites. You know, which is, you know, very evil as well. Hand joining hand with the wicked, you won't go unpunished. That's what the Lord said. So reading this one more time, Romans 1 and 14, I am debtor both to the Greeks. So when you read Romans, when you read Ephesians, when you read Colossians, when you read Corinthians, when you read these epistles that Paul has set up, even Timothy, when you read these epistles, you have to understand history and you have to keep them in their proper context. Or else a Christian may come to you and say some crazy something crazy that has nothing to do with the Bible. Because why? They don't understand history. They don't know history. You know, a lot of people don't even subscribe to the Apocrypha. They'll say something like that's done away with. You know, that's not canon. You know, they say that's not authorized. Which if you aren't studying, if you aren't learning, if you aren't seeking the Most High, then you would be confounded. You would be caught out there. So Romans 1 and 14, I am debtor both to the Greeks and to the barbarians. Meaning the barbarians, meaning they spoke a certain language outside of their God-given tongue, a Hebrew, you know. Even though Paul spoke many other languages and spoke many other tongues, you know, by default, Israelites spoke Hebrew. That's our native tongue, you know, as well as English. English is a language that was given to us, and these last names are names that was given to us, as well as being beaten us, you know, like all these other feast days, you know, as well as many things that is coming to the earth now. You being forced to follow their religion, their consent. You're forced to follow their regulations, or else things is going to come back on the earth as how it was during the Greek rulership, during the Greek captivity. If you don't do this, then you're going to have to die. So that's why you have the Maccabees that stood up and rose up on behalf of fighting for our nation. Now I want to go back. I want to go back to this in First Maccabees. First Maccabees. And I'm gonna read. I want to read down to I'm going to read down to verse 11, but I'm going to finish this off right here. So, First Maccabees chapter 1, and I'm going to start at verse 7. First Maccabees 1 and 7 in the Apocrypha. So, Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. So, I believe I got this. So, no, I didn't put this in here. Let me find this real quick. So you have these let me see if I can show this somehow. You have these different Greek rulers during the time of 320 BC all the way up to 63 BC. So let me see if I can somehow show this. So like it, give me a second. Let me put this in here so I can. I had put a different photo in my notes to be able to show, but let me see if this will. So you got I don't know if this is going to show. So like it might work. So you have these different Greek rulers, you know, during the time period of 320 BC all the way up to 63. So you got the Ptolemy kings, Ptolemy rulers, and the Seleucid rulers. So this is so you got Alexander. We're reading about Alexander right now, which, you know, he died. You can read about their history. That's you know, a lot of people know about their history. That's something that they used to teach in school, but they don't teach it no more. So First Maccabees 1 and 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. So of course evils are going to be multiplied, especially when you're under the rulership of wicked men. You know, so evils were multiplied in the earth, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So you can have much sorrow in this captivity, but it doesn't give us the consent to start following the ways of everybody else. You know, doing the things that everybody else do. We have to, by default, stay within our heritage, stay within the words of life and the things that the Lord has commanded Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which transpired down now to us living in the land of living. So I want to go to us. I want to jump to First Maccabees chapter 2. So this is First Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 1, and it reads, in those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Joarib, from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modim. And he had 5 sons, Joanna, called Cadas, Simon, called Dassa, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar, called Avaron, and Jonathan, whose surname was Alphaeus. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, woe is me! Wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there, when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Her temple is become as a man without glory. So they overthrew the temple. They overthrew the nation. They was killing Israelites. They was destroying the temple where we was going to keep the law, the statutes, and commandments. So they overthrew a lot of these things, which the heathen made a mockery of things that was set up to glorify the Lord. When the Lord also said in Galatians chapter 6. So of course the heathen, they profaned and destroyed the temple, and they was destroying and killing Israelites that was keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments. Now the Lord also said this. This is Galatians chapter 6. And I'm gonna start at verse 7, the classic, and it reads, Galatians 6 and 7. Be not deceived. So don't be deceived by us having our names taken away, having our laws and our statutes being taken away, having to bow down what was forcefully put in front of us to bow down of. And a lot of the Israelites was forced to consent to their customs and their religion, you know. So we have to understand that this was all set up to deceive us, to deceive Israelites. So it says, be not deceived. God is not mocked. So the heathen was mocking all the things that the Lord has set up. The heathen were mocking us keeping the Sabbath. You know, the heathens, they've made a mockery and a laughing stock of everything that the Lord has gave us. Still up to this day, they make a mockery of the Israelites. You know, and one of the first things that the disciples asked the Lord, when you read Matthew 24, what is the sign of your coming? He said, be not deceived, you know. So you got a lot of people thinking that Christmas is the true tradition that we're supposed to keep. You got a lot of people thinking that Hanukkah isn't the true tradition. Feast of Dedication isn't the true tradition, isn't a true foundational thing that we're supposed to follow as Israelites. So you got a lot of Israelites, and those that don't know they're Israelites, you got a lot of so-called Black, Hispanics, and Native Americans following the ways of the Greeks, following the ways of the Romans, because they're all the same people. They just have different tribes, you know. So the Lord said, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So the Lord isn't going to be mocked. You know, he's gonna stand up for everything that is righteous, whether we're forced to do something or not, whether we're put to death for something or not. The Lord isn't going to be deceived. You know, I mean, the Lord is not going to be mocked. So we have to understand that, according to history, these things play a significant part in these last days as well. You know, because it's life or death. That's what our forefathers stood for. They stood up for fighting for the commandments. They was fighting for faith. They was fighting for those that wasn't able to fight for themselves. Because you have some that was fearful. You know, you have, and that's according to the law. You have some that was not able to go to war. You know, everybody is not going to be set up to fight. You know, let me get this in the law real quick. This is what the law consists because the law was set up to be the spiritual foundation for us to understand. You know, the law is spiritual. You know, and you got a lot of people that say they're spiritual. You know, I'm spiritual. You know, but they don't understand that the law is spiritual. Let me read that real quick. That's in Romans. Yeah, this is Romans chapter 7, and I'm gonna start at verse 14, and it reads. Romans 7 and 14. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. And even King David said the law is very pure, which another way of understanding spiritual is pure, which a righteousness according to that spiritual aspect. Let me get that real quick in Psalms. Now this is Psalms. Let me get this real quick. This is Psalms chapter 19 and verse 7. Psalms chapter 19 and verse 7, and it reads, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. So this was all intended for us to walk according to striving for perfection, to be pure, to be righteous. That's what it's for. Because even the Messiah, Yahushua himself said, the law was made for a sinner. So this is what our forefathers fought for. Now this is Deuteronomy chapter 20. And I'm going to start at verse Deuteronomy chapter 20 and verse 7. And it reads, because everybody wasn't on the lines of fighting, you know. Some had wives, some had houses that they just built. So this is what the law consists of, being an exemption from battle. Because you, even when you read in the Torah, the law, Moses and Aaron, they had to deal with going to war. Joshua had to deal with going to war. You know, King David had to deal with that. Saul had to deal with that. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 20 and verse 7. And it reads, and what man is there that had betrothed a wife and had not taken her? Let him go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle. And another man take her, and the officers shall speak further unto the people, and they shall say, what man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return unto his house, lest his brother's heart faint as well as his heart. And it shall be, when the officers have made an end of speaking unto the people, that they shall make captains of the armies to lead the people. So we had leaders, as Moses had leaders in the time of Moses, as well as Abraham had leaders, you know. So you had the Maccabees that rose up, and there was defending the nation. So this is First Maccabees chapter 2. And I'm going to start at verse 9. First Maccabees 2 and 9. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. These are things that actually happen when you read the history on things that went on in Maccabees. Slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation had not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman she is become a bond slave. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and our glory, is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. So the Gentiles, the heathens, the Greeks, they had profaned and overthrew our nation, killed many of the babies, slain many of the women that was circumcising their children. You know, which you can read about that and things that was commanded to Abraham to be transpired down to Isaac and Jacob, all the way in Genesis 15, Genesis 17. So, you know, our forefathers, they were standing up on behalf of this, which we always had to deal with a spiritual warfare. You know, we always had to deal with a spiritual warfare. It wasn't nothing new. Now, reading down. Verse 13, First Maccabees 2 and 13. To what end, therefore, shall we live any longer? Then might Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn very sore. So when we keep the Feast of Dedication, we understand that things was done to our nation. Things was done to keep us in a position, you know, to not know who we are, to not strive for the Lord's commandments. Verse 14, First Maccabees 2 and 14. Then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn very sore. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city, Modin, to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. So this is having a council, because we, you know, as a nation of people, we always came together and discussed matters. Verse 17. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias, on this wise thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. so shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends. And thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice through all the nations that are under the king's dominion, obey him, and fall away, every one from their religion of their fathers, and give consent to his commandments. Yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we shall forsake the law and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, meaning our worshiping of the Most High, either on the right hand or the left. Now, when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was at Modin according to the king's commandment. Which thing, when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. Neither could he forbear to shew his anger according to judgment. Wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. So he was overtaken by his zeal. Now this is the Hasmonean rulers, according to the Israelite rulers that was in this time, the Maccabees that was ruling during this time. You know. So Mattathias, which he was in rulership 167 to 166 BC, all the way down to Antigonus, which was 440 to 37 BC. Which after Mattathias, then Judas Maccabees was the leader in his stead. So this is what the Feast of Dedication is consisting of: rededicating the temple, you know, cleansing the altar, the abomination of desolation, you know, and them making a mockery and forcing us to go according to their customs, you know. Now, I want to go to 1 Maccabees chapter 4, and I want to start at verse 55. 1 Maccabees 4 and verse 55. Now again, Mattathias, you know, he reigned from 167 to 166 BC, and Judas Maccabees reigned 166 through 160 BC. And then after Judas was Jonathan, and then after Jonathan was Simon, then after Simon was John, and then after John was Artabolus, then after Artabolus, according to the Jews, was Alexander, you know, the Maccabees, the Hasmonean rulers. So these are all our forefathers. So this is 1 Maccabees chapter 4, and I'm gonna start at verse 1 Maccabees chapter 4, and I'm gonna start at verse so like I want to read. I'm gonna go back to chapter 3. So like, and then we're gonna go to chapter 4. 1 Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 55, and it reads, "And after this Judas ordained captains over the people, even captains over thousands, and over hundreds, and over 50s, and over 10s. But as for such as were building houses, or had betrothed wives, or were planting vineyards, or were fearful, those he commanded that they should return every man to his house according to the law." And that's what we read according to Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 7 and verse 8. You know, we had to go strictly according to the law to make sure nobody was overthrown in the battle, to make sure nobody was fearful, and make sure nobody would put that fearful spirit on another man, and to make sure those that had just got married wouldn't die, you know, without the time period of them comforting their wives, as well as those that was building houses. You know, they wouldn't have just done that, build a house, and then you go into battle, and then you die, and then that house wasn't dedicated and wasn't foundationally put in place for that man to have all that set up just for naught. So that's you know, that's one thing that the Maccabees told our forefathers, that if you just got married, don't go to war. If you just planted a vineyard, don't go to war, because all these things are spiritual. You out there battling, you out there in the war field, you know, and you thinking about, am I gonna lose my life? I just got married. Or am I gonna lose my life? I just built a house. Am I gonna lose my life? I just had a child. Things like that. So our forefathers, they were doing things decently in order, as we are well instructed to do. We have to do things decently in order, you know. So reading this again. So 1 Maccabees 3:58. And Judah said, arm yourselves and be valiant men, and see that ye be in readiness against the morning, that ye may fight with these nations that are assembled together against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our people and our sanctuary. Nevertheless, as the will of Most High God is in the heaven, so let him do. So the Hasmonean rulers, you know, was defending all of these areas right here. You know, I'm not sure some of them you would be able to see, but this is what the Israelites was doing, protecting these cities and these expansions, you know. Because we read about Modin, that's a city, you know, Jerusalem, and you got Jericho, you know. So this is what our forefathers was doing. So I want to go to chapter 4, 1 Maccabees chapter 4, and I want to start at verse 40. 1 Maccabees chapter 4, I'm going to start at verse 38. 1 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 38, and it reads, and when they saw the sanctuary desolate and their altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts, as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priests' chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads. So all of this happened during the Greek captivity, being under the Greeks, you know, which now we're under the American captivity, you know, but we still have to remember things that went on during the Greek captivity as well as during the Babylonian captivity, you know, because the Lord told us to look back according to the days of old, you know, and even where we are right now, we should be thinking ourselves, you know, our forefathers and our foremothers got put to death for such things that was given to us to be able to have, and then now we're not even putting up a fight. You know, you got a lot of people consenting to these other heathens' religions, you know, which is nothing but wickedness. But you got a lot of our forefathers, our ancestors, that got killed to protect us and to make sure we follow the ways of righteousness. Now 40, verse 40. 38. It's like 39. 1 Maccabees 4 and 39. They rent their clothes and made great lamentation, and cast ashes upon their heads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets, and cried toward heaven. And that's according to Numbers chapter 10 and verse 7 on down. You know, having to blow the shofar, the ram's horn, the trumpet, for whenever danger is entering into the city, we have to give a certain sound. You know, we have to give a certain sound when it's time to gather. We have to give a certain sound when we are under attack. And that's Numbers chapter 10, verse 7 on down. Verse 41, 1 Maccabees 4 and 41. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress, until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and buried out the defiled stones into an unclean place. Now the defiled stones, that we had to do this because according to the law, even when you read Leviticus chapter 14, and when you read Deuteronomy 27, Leviticus 14, verse 1 on down, as well as verse 4, Leviticus 14:4 talks about the priest having to go in to take out the defiled stones and deal with the leprosy. You know, even now, more so, we don't have the priesthood set up because a lot of things was stripped from us, our customs and things that we had according to the temples, the sanctuaries where we used to go make sacrifices. Even though we don't deal with animal sacrificing anymore, we don't have the old customs how we used to have. Now the Most High, Yahweh Shah, Mashiach, the Messiah being the high priest, we still have to make sure we go according to taking out the spiritual things, which on another level can consist of lust, adultery, fornication, idolatry, and things like that. But as far as leprosy and uncleanness, the priests had to do that. And that's what our forefathers, the Maccabees, was doing. They was taking out all of the filthiness that the heathens, the Greeks was putting in their sanctuary, putting animals feces on it, animals fluids on it, pigs, swine mainly. They had harlots in the temple, you know. So they was mocking. They was making a mockery of the Lord's holiness, righteousness. And so Daniel spoke about it, you know, when you read Daniel the 8th chapter, and the Messiah, Yahweh Shah, spoke about things pertaining to the history of the Feast of Dedication, having to cleanse the altar. And so now we still have to cleanse the altar. We still have to make sure our spirit is right, because the third temple, which when you read Matthew, you know, this final temple is the Israelites, you know, so the Holy Spirit is within the Israelites. So this is Matthew chapter 24, and I'm going to start at verse 15. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, and it reads, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation." So they was putting abominable things in the temple where we was going to as Israelites to keep the laws, statutes, and commandments. Matthew 24 and 15, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet," which you can read that in Daniel chapter 8, "stand in the holy place, whoso read it, let him understand." So we was being under attack. That's why the Lord, when you read on down, the Lord said when you might have to flee to the mountains and things like that. Our forefathers and foremothers in 70 AD actually were under attack, you know, and having to run away and go into various parts in different areas. That's why you have people that say, well, we was dwelling with the Africans, or we was in the land of Africa, you know, we was intertwined with other dark melanated people. That's true. We had to do that because the Romans was overthrowing us. And also, when you go back into how the Greeks was killing us and oppressing us, we still had to fight. You know, we still had to make sure that we was defending ourselves, you know. And the Lord also spoke about this, and when you read John the 16th chapter, John chapter 16, verse 32, verse 33, you know, the Lord already foretold that we was going to have to deal with oppression. We was going to have to deal with these heathens reigning over us. So now we in the American captivity, you know, all the way back to the 1400s, 1619. Now we got the Emmett Tills. Now we got the Underground Railroads. All our history goes back to having to fight and literally defend ourselves, our wives, our sisters, our brothers, our babies, because all the things that the heathens want to do, you know, they don't want nobody to know that the Israelites are the Negroes, the Hispanics, the Native Americans. You know, they don't want nobody to know about the Israelites' Sabbath days, feast days, high holy days, you know, keeping the commandments. So that's what the Maccabees did. They were standing up for that. And that's what we have to do. This is a spiritual war. You know, these are things that are actually set up for us to protect and to keep, you know, within the forefront, you know, because we have to guard this. We have to guard, we have to defend the word. We have to defend our households. We have to defend our marriages. We have to defend our souls. We have to defend the spiritual things, because everything is spiritual, you know. So going back through the spirit, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 42. So he chose, so this is what Judas did, you know, because as we said earlier, you know, you got Mattathias that was ruling 167 BC all the way to 166 BC. He didn't have a long rulership, and he put his life on the line. And then you got Judas Maccabees, 166 to 160 BC. And then you have Jonathan from 160 to 142 BC during the Hasmonean period, where our forefathers was making sure that all the Israelites didn't get wiped out, you know, because they was going to kill every last one of us, because we were standing up for the law, statutes, and commandments. And now nobody wants to stand up for the law, statutes, and commandments. You know, when you see another so-called black man murder another black man, that's giving up. That's a spiritual warfare, you know. When you see another so-called black, Hispanic, or Native American laying down with another man's woman, that's a spiritual warfare, you know. We supposed to fight to protect one another, but yet you got all these other nations and heathens that aren't Israelites, that wasn't given law, statutes, and commandments, that have gave us their customs, you know. Say, here, Negro man, Negro woman, you know, kill yourselves, you know, eat unclean things, forsake your God. This is what our forefathers fought for us to continue to follow the ways that we're supposed to follow, not follow their ways, you know. And they're looking at us saying, let's find more ways for them to kill themselves. That's what the Greeks, that's what the Romans, that's what all the other heathens are doing. They're finding more ways for the Israelites to continue to wipe themselves out, bow down to their gods, and forget our Heavenly Father. This is why the Feast of Dedication is so important, because we got to continue to have this in our spirit as far as fighting for what the Lord intended for us to have, to dedicate things to Him, to follow the ways of righteousness, to stand up for righteousness, to make sure we're in the lines of protecting one another. When you go back to Matthew 22, verse 37, verse 38, and verse 39, the first two great commandments that the Lord said, love one another as we love ourselves. How can we love one another when we're following the ways of the heathen? You know, the heathen don't teach us to love another black man or black woman or black woman. You know, the heathens don't teach us to worship the Lord in spirit and truth. You know, when has a Greek, when has a Roman, when has a German, when has an Irishman, when has a heathen nation came together? When has the heathens came together to say, we want to help y'all better yourselves? That's nowhere in history and nowhere in America, even outside of America. So if we don't stand up for ourselves and fight for ourselves and fight for our nation, then who gonna do it? How is it gonna get done? When is it gonna get done? This is why we gotta make videos. This is why the Israelites gotta go in the highways and byways. This is why we gotta prophesy against this city, against America. Because America ain't done nothing for us. They put us in chains, they put us in yokes, they put us in handcuffs, they put their knee on our necks. You know, they don't want us to continue to multiply. You know, they continue to feed us lies and put things in front of us to distract us. You know, so the Lord said, you know, verse 43, and when we say the Lord spoke and rose up these mighty men. First Maccabees 4 and 43, who cleansed the sanctuary and buried out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when, as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down and laid up the stones and the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to shew what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, which goes back to Deuteronomy 27, verses 3 on down. Even the priests going into the house that was filled with leprosy in Leviticus the 14th chapter. So now, even though we don't have a place and a custom where we can go to a temple and beseech a priest, now the Messiah himself is a high priest. You can read about it in Hebrews the 4th chapter, Hebrews the 7th chapter. You know, the blood of animals is no longer sufficient for us, you know, because we didn't overcome, and we didn't build up as a nation pertaining to the blood of an animal. Now we have the blood of the Messiah, which is a more perfect thing than what we have according to the old. So these sacrifices and these things that we have to keep according to the law was to be done by the priest. So reading down, verse 48, 1 Maccabees 4:48, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple. But now we have the temple, which the Holy Spirit is in this temple. The Holy Spirit should be in another so-called Black, Hispanic, or Native American temple, you know, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16, as well as in Acts chapter 7, verse 48 on down. The Lord, his presence is in the flesh of those that's striving to keep his will, to do his will, to have a mind to change, you know, have a conscience to do away with that old man and that old woman. That's where the Lord's temple is. It's in that spirit. It's in that vessel. Which this flesh, it's a tent, and inside this tent, the Lord's Spirit is supposed to be in there. You know, verse 48 again. 1 Maccabees 4:48. And made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hollowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense on the table, and upon the altar they burned incense and the lamps that were upon the candlestick. So this is why we have a seven candlestick. You also can understand that 7 is a spiritual number. You know, also when you read the book of Revelation, the 1st chapter, verse 18 all the way down to 20, it speaks on the 7 lamps, you know, which represents the spirit of the Most High, which according to Hanukkah you may see 9, but the Israelites, the so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, according to the Bible, we deal with 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is what Hanukkah is about, dedicating, making sure the light is burning in the temple, and it represents the spiritual aspect of making sure the light is burning, and we on fire for the Messiah. We on fire for the Lord, you know. So reading this again, 1 Maccabees 4:49. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table, and upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lightened it, that they might give light into the temple, in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Cassalu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made, which on a deeper level it should represent and give us an examination, a foundational way to examine ourselves, that we should have things that are dealing with the new. We can't be dealing with the old man, the old woman. We have to be rededicating the spirit that the Lord gave us, making sure we have the right mindset, making sure we're worshiping the Lord in spirit and truth, and not doing it in the way that the heathens want us to do it. Keeping Christmas, you know, that's not according to what God wants us to do. That's just another pagan day, you know. New Year's, that's not intended for what God gave the Israelites. You know, our New Year is around March, you know, leading up to April, you know. And we're in the 10th month, you know. So we still got a little over 2 more months, you know. In that 3rd month, sometimes we have to have a leap, you know. So reading this again, 1 Maccabees 4:53, and offer sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even in that was it dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals. Because hey, even in the time during Daniel, you know, it was also spoken that these things will be done, you know. So verse 55, 1 Maccabees 4:55, then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Most High God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance with praise. So we supposed to keep the feast of dedication, as known as Hanukkah, which dedication, when you look up the word Hanukkah, it also means dedication. And in the Hebrew, it goes back to Hanukkah, you know. Verse 57, first Maccabees 4:57. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among, thus was there very great gladness among the people. So this is the time to be glad. This is the time to be in the spirit of rejoicing for what the Lord intended us to have our mindset on, and for what's to come. Because we're going to have a new sanctuary in the kingdom of heaven under the Messiah, Yahushua. It's not going to be any more heathens polluting the temple anymore. And the Lord's spirit is within the temple of the Israelites, you know. So verse 58, 1 Maccabees 4:58. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month, Caselu, with mirth and gladness. So this is intended for us to be in the spirit of being glad that the Lord has rededicated through the spirit of mighty men the temple, and rededicated and cleansed the temple. And more so, we should have the understanding and the self-examination of cleansing our temples, which is a spiritual aspect, because everything is spiritual. Now, like the video says, Feast of Dedication, this is a spiritual warfare. Life and death is our only options. Now, when we go back, as we just read, let me read it again though. Deuteronomy chapter 30. Let me read it again as I already read it. Deuteronomy chapter 30. This is a warfare. We dealing with a spiritual war, you know. Now, before I bring this out, I just thought about this precept. Let me get this real quick. Before we fight with flesh and blood, we have to fight with ourselves. We have to understand that it starts with ourselves, cleansing ourselves. You know. Now this is Ephesians chapter 6. And I'm gonna start at verse 12. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12, and it reads, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness, against the rulers of the darkness. Let me read it one more time. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. It says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So after the Maccabees was fighting and rededicated the temple, cleansed the temple, guess what? We still in captivity. You know, that happened all the way 166 BC, all the way down to 40 BC, you know, all the way down to 37 BC. So now we still having to fight and to cleanse the altar. So before we can actually fight with flesh and blood, we have to fight according to the spiritual warfare that we're dealing with. You know, verse 13, Ephesians 6 and 13. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God Most High, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Verse 14, stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness. So we can't have wickedness on us. We can't have a lying spirit on us. We can't have lukewarm on us. We can't have slothfulness on us, just slowly waiting for somebody to come pick us up, you know, for somebody to come push us and to make us serve the Lord, make us repent. We can't wait and have somebody to come push us off the boat or push us off a cliff and say you're taking too long. We have to willfully do this. You know, we have to willfully cleanse our spirits, our minds, you know. So I want to go back to Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 19 again. And it reads, it says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. Verse 20, that thou mayest love the Lord thy God Most High, and that thou mayest obey his voice, and that thou mayest cleave unto him, for he is thy life and the length of thy days, that thou mayest dwell in the land which the Lord swore unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. So we have to make sure that, for one, we choosing life. Because if you're not choosing life, then you're walking in the ways of choosing death, which it says in Romans chapter 6 and verse 23, the wages of sin is death, you know. So we have to make sure that we fall in the things that's going to help us and bring forth redemption, salvation, deliverance. Now I also want to get, you know, life and death, because we got to deal, we dealing with life and death, which it's the two options that we got to deal with. When, let me get this real quick in Daniel. This is Daniel chapter 12, you know. Because, hey, even though the Lord said in Luke 9 and 27, some are not going to die. The Lord said, according to, now this was a address towards the elect, you know. Not every man, woman, and child is going to die. You know, some are still going to be alive. But just because some may be alive, that doesn't mean that they're going to receive life everlasting, you know. And more so, when you die, if you die, you have another way of coming back, you know, and being given the crown of life, given given a reward of, well done, my good and faithful servant, entering into the kingdom, you know. Now this is Daniel chapter 12, and I want to start at verse 2, and it reads, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. So when you read 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 13 on down, some that are in the grave are literally going to come out of the graves. Well, not some, all that are in the graves are going to come out of the graves when the Lord returns and receive a second judgment. You know, and understanding the spiritual warfare that we're dealing with, you should have your mind set on there's no escaping judgment day. There's no escaping that. You know, you can read about the book of life in Revelation, the 20th chapter. You know, it's no escaping judgment day. So you got to figure out how you want to approach the spiritual warfare that we're dealing with. The two options that we have to choose from, life or death. Every day of our lives that we wake up and we see and we have the breath in our body, we're able to move our hands, we're able to blink for those that's able-bodied to do these things. Before you make a move, you got to understand that there's no escaping judgment. You know, so, and this is what the prophet Daniel said, Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. See, now let me get this in Hebrews chapter 9 real quick. So which one we gonna choose? Because even like Moses told us in Deuteronomy chapter 30 and verse 19, he also told us, the Lord also commanded him to tell us in Deuteronomy 11 and the 11th chapter and 26th verse on down. You know, I sit before you life and death, blessings and curses. You know, so we can turn these curses around. You know, and have them taken off of us. You can read about it in the Deuteronomy 30th chapter. How the Lord commanded and promised us that he's going to put these curses on these heathens. You know, so as we keep Feast of Dedication and we think about it, the Lord is actually going to take these curses and put them on Alexander the Great when he comes back. He's going to put them on Antiochus Epiphanes, you know, the first, the second, and the third. He's going to put it on Philip the first. He's going to put it on all the Seleucid rulers. He's going to put it on all the Ptolemy rulers. He's going to put it on all the Greeks. He's going to put these curses on all the Romans, you know, according to the heathens, according to Esau, Moab, Ammon, you know, all the heathens. You know, read about it in the Deuteronomy 30th chapter, verse 7. You know, so this is Hebrews chapter 9 and verse, I'm going to start at verse 27. Hebrews 9 and 27, and it reads, and as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, the judgment. So judgment is coming, you know, whether we're alive or whether we're in the grave. Now, I also want to get, as I already quoted, 1 Thessalonians, you know. So we got to figure out what we want. I got to figure out what I want, life or death, you know, blessings, you know, goodwill. You've done your job, my faithful servant, or depart from me, I never known you. Nothing but brimstone and fire. So this is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13, and it reads, but I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. So even our forefathers and foremothers and the young ones that got put to death for keeping the commandments and the law in Maccabees, you know, the Maccabees brothers, they and the Hasmonean rulers, they actually prayed for the dead. You know, that's actually a thing on earth according to the righteousness with the Most High. When somebody's soul has left them, you still have the ability to pray for them, that the Lord forgives their sins, that the Lord brings them, you know, out of having to be judged for wicked acts, you know, because even James, the brother of the Lord, you know, when you read James, it says the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, you know. So, hey, the spiritual aspect, prayer is very important as well. So going back to this, 1 Thessalonians 4 and verse 14, for if we believe that Yahushua died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Yahushua will Most High God bring with him. So we as Israelites understand that when we have to bury somebody, that's not the end all be all. We actually will be, if it's of the Lord's will to redeem us, you know, if we're according to the elect, the Lord will grant us another opportunity to see the individual again. Verse 15, 1 Thessalonians 4:15. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. Because the Lord is going to raise those in the graves first. So those that are in the graves that kept the commandments and the faith and endured until the end, the Lord is going to raise them up first. You know, verse 16, 1 Thessalonians 4:16. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. And the dead in Christ, Hamashiach, shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. So we have to comfort one another. Just as our brothers, you know, and our forefathers, the Hasmonean leaders, Judas, Mattathias, Simon, John, just like our forefathers comfort one another, you know. This is the same thing that we have to do. Now I also want to get in 2 Corinthians real quick. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and I'm going to start at verse 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and I'm going to start at verse 9. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 9, and it reads, Wherefore we labor, that whether present or absent, we may be accepted of him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Hamashiach, of Christ, that everyone, it says that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he had done, whether it be good or bad. So whether you're doing good or bad, you're going to have to give an answer. You're going to have to give it an account, you know, whether somebody's seen it or not, whether you made a video or not, whether you went to camp or not, whether you kept the feast days or not, you know, whether you was a wicked man or a woman or a child or not, you know, whether you really believed or you were just faking or not, whether you're really living the life according to being an Israelite or not, whether you accept you're an Israelite or not, whether you hate Israelites or not, you know, whether you love all the other nations or not, you're going to have to be accounted for everything that it is that you do, everything that you've ever thought about, everything that opened up and came out of your mouth. You know, open up your mouth and be and speaking on such things. We're going to have to all give an account of it. I'm going to have to give an account of it. You know, and this is a spiritual warfare that we dealing with. You know, before we actually fight with a sword, before we actually fight with guns, before we actually go toe-to-toe with anybody else, before World War III comes, before Jacob's trouble comes, before martial law comes, this is literally a time period where we should be getting our spirit right, where we should be cleansing the temples, cleansing our thoughts, our ways, our actions, our patterns, you know, reading the word, studying, applying the word to our lives, our day-to-day walk, you know, how we treating our spouses, how we teaching and treating our kids, you know, abusing our children, you know, abusing them with words or abusing them with our hands. All of this stuff got to be cleansed, you know, whether a man raped a woman or not, whether you masturbating, whether you're smoking, whether you're doing drugs, whether you're thinking drugs is going to take the pain away. Every woman, every man, every child is going to have to give an account for all the things that they've done, you know. So I also want to get in Revelation chapter 20. Now this is Revelation chapter 20, and I'm going to start at verse, I believe I want verse 14. Revelation chapter 20 and verse 14, and it reads, I'm going to start at verse This whole thing is good. I'm gonna start at verse 13, Revelation 20 and 13, and it reads, "And the sea gave up the dead." Now this is talking about, if you read Revelation, you have to stay within Revelation to get the understanding of Revelation. You know, so let's go to Revelation chapter 17 and verse 15. And I'm gonna start at verse 15, Revelation 17 and 15, and it reads, "And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So it's not saying that it's not going to be any more water. When you read Revelation, you have to stay within Revelation a lot of the times to understand what's going on. Also, the Lord spoke in parables, dark sayings, similitudes, you know. So it says again, Revelation 20 and 13, "And the sea gave up the dead," talking about rulers, talking about these kingdoms. Because these Greek rulers that was overthrowing and killing the Israelites, when the Messiah comes back, he's going to be the one that's over all of these other nations. You know, he's going to be the one calling the shots. You know, it's going to be an Israelite man in rulership. You know, when Yahushua comes back, he's going to be the top man. It's not going to be anybody over the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So Revelation 20 and 13 again, "And the sea gave up the dead, which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead, which were in them." So when you understand hell, you also understand that it's a condition. You know, let me get a precept on that. Let's get Jonah. Let's go to Jonah real quick. So a lot of people think hell is talking about some underground where a red man with a fork is literally got people bound up. Now this is Jonah. It's actually talking about a condition, because we're in hell right now. So I believe I want to get at least 2 precepts, maybe 3. So this is the book of Jonah, touching on hell, as we're reading in Revelation chapter 20. This is Jonah chapter 2, and I'm going to start at verse 1, and it reads, "Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord Yahweh, his most high God, out of the fish's belly, and said, I cried by reason of my affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell cried I, and thou heardest my voice." Because this condition that we dealing with, you know, we having to be free from it. If you read Acts chapter 14 verse 22, it speaks on behalf of, "Through much tribulation we shall enter into the kingdom of heaven." You know, so let me get one more precept. Let's go to Psalms. It's the book of Psalms, because King David said he was in hell as well. The book of Psalms, chapter 18, and I'm going to start at verse 3. Psalms chapter 18 and verse 3. "I will call upon the Lord Yahweh, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies." See that? "The sorrows of death compassed me, and the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. The snares of death prevented me." See that? Perverted me. So going back to Revelation 20 and 13, it says, "And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works." You see that? It says, "And they were judged every man according to their works." So we're going to, every man, woman, and child is going to be judged, you know, for whatever it is that we had found in our hands, you know, which can also consist of our minds, things that we're worshiping, things that we're bowing down to, you know. So this is why it's important to cast off all those idols. This is why it's important to only fear and worship the true and living Heavenly Father, the creator of the heavens and earth. This is why it's important for us not to deal with pagan customs. This is why it's important for us not to self-worship, not to follow our own minds and our own ways. This is why it's important not to lean on our own understanding. This is why it's important for us to stay in the Word, to stay connected to our roots, to be built up, to be rooted and grounded in the Most High God, Yahweh and Yahweh Shah. All right. So Lord willing, you was edified. It's still the Feast of Dedication. So I want to get this in St. John real quick. It's the book of St. John. And maybe 2 more verses after this. Now this is St. John chapter 10. If you join late, you can always go back and look at the rest of the video. This is St. John chapter 10 and verse 22, and it reads, "And it was at Jerusalem." And who was at Jerusalem? Negro, man, woman, and children. The true Jews, the real Jews. The Messiah himself, Yahweh Shah himself, King David himself, Solomon himself. That's who was at Jerusalem. But who's in Jerusalem now? That's not the true real people according to what the Lord has set up, and what we know to be the truth. Those are fakes that are in Jerusalem now. But the Lord is going to change that when he gets ready to return and make his second appearing. Now this is again St. John 10 and 22. "And it was at Jerusalem the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. And Yahweh Shah walked in the temple in Solomon's porch." So the Messiah, Yahweh Shah HaMashiach himself, kept the Feast of Dedication. He remembered what went on with the Maccabees. He remembered what Daniel the prophet prophesied about the altar being defiled, the temple being spoken of being desolate. So also the temple also represents us, the Israelites as well. It's not a building. It's not you going to some building and then somebody else, according to the heathen, trying to go there and defile that temple. Now there's going to come a time period where they're going to be trying to kill us, hurt us. You can read about that in 2nd Esdras, the 16th chapter. You can read about that on a lot of things that's leading up to that in 2nd Esdras 15 as well. So they're going to be trying to destroy this temple or your temple, an Israelite temple, trying to put you to death for believing on the Son of Man, Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, and his teachings. So this is Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 3. Lord willing, this was edifying to you. This is Isaiah chapter 26 and 3, and it reads, "Thou will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusted in thee. Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Yahweh is everlasting strength." So you have to trust in the Lord and not on your flesh. So this is Galatians chapter 5 and verse 16, and it reads, Galatians 5 and 16, "This I say then, walk in the spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh." Now, even though you understand that you're dealing with a spiritual warfare, you have to fight yourself every day. You have to fight those wicked thoughts. You have to forsake your flesh. You can't give in to your flesh. So you have to choose life or death. The wages of sin is death. Your flesh doesn't profit anything. That's St. John 6 and 63. Your eyes don't profit you staring at a beautiful woman and saying, "I want her." It doesn't matter if she's married or not. You can't let your flesh get the best of you. You have to overcome your flesh. Just the same way the Son of Man, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, overcame his flesh. His flesh was crucified. So what do we have to do? We have to crucify our flesh. Not literally, but on a spiritual level, because this is a spiritual fight we're dealing with. So one more time, Galatians 5 and 16. "This I say then, walk in the spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh." Verse 17, Galatians 5 and 17. For the flesh lusted at, Galatians 5:17 one more time. For the flesh lusted against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. But if ye be led of the spirit, ye are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, which is debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies. And heresies goes back to false doctrines. Lies that has nothing to do with the scriptures. So these are things that we have to cleanse. These are things that we have to figure out. Is it something in me that's going to keep me away from life and cause me to receive a judgment of death and my name being blotted out, the book of life? These are things that we have to recount, examine, ask ourselves every day. So Fisherman of Zion with another video, Lord willing. It was edifying. Peace and blessings to you. Happy feast of dedication. Also, happy new moon, which just closed out, which is another month that the Lord has given us. Another month the Lord has blessed us to be able to see in the land of living in his truth, knowing our nationality and our heritage, and the law, statutes, and commandments that he has given to descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Peace and blessings to you. Continue to endure. Continue to forsake the flesh and the cares of this world. Continue to stay prayed up. Continue to keep the feast. We still got another day to keep this day to the best of our ability. Lord willing, this is edifying to you. We don't count this as a light thing to do. All praises to the Heavenly Father, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, and the beginning and ending. Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shah HaMashiach. Yahweh, in the name of his son, Yahweh Shah. Shalom.